should be away because people who are being interviewed might have fear that Leos, who's at a high level of responsibility in the police department, might be steering the investigation toward one person and away from other persons. Is that what your fear is?
One of the issues with conflict of interest is you want to remove even the perception of impropriety.
Okay. And your assignment by me was, is there a conflict or not? Not to look at all the evidence in the case, true?
That's correct.
All right. And when Mr. Jensvold was saying to you, you know, doesn't I guess you call it the level of insanguity, the level of relationship between two people, don't you look at that? I mean, you know, a cousin, sixth cousin once removed, Adam and Eve. You know, I mean, where do you draw the line, right? Did you consider that when you decided that, hey, there's a conflict here? And if you did, what was Angel Leos's position with the department that came into your analysis as to why there really is a conflict here?
It was the direct relationship as the grandson of the deputy chief of investigations for the agency that's investigating him.
And then finally, Mr. Jensvold asked you about all these suspects. You know, Terrence Santasteven only mentioned one suspect. If a police agency has evidence to believe that other people are viable suspects from other sources, like Dominic Leo's mother or Dominic himself, is it proper police procedure to not investigate those other suspects as a result of one suspect saying, hey, just look at this guy?
I recognize that law enforcement, there are not unlimited resources. At some point, you have to move on with the investigation. However, it should still be explored, the statements that are made by witnesses or suspects as to the credibility of the statement. If it could be explained away quickly, then okay, at least you looked into it.
And then finally, in this case, Dominic Leos claimed he was in his apartment putting on some socks and shoes at the time of the shooting. Then Dominic Leos claimed that he was outside his apartment. Then Dominic Leos claimed he was inside his apartment. Another person who was with Dominic Leos.
Objection, hearsay, and leading.
I can leave, Judge.
Sorry, you can't, and the court's going to sustain.
Okay, so imagine Dominic Leos giving many different statements as to where he was at the time of the shooting. And as far as investigating suspects, the Casa Grande Police Department would be duty-bound to investigate Dominic Leos as a suspect. Would you agree?
I'd agree with that.
And it becomes difficult for a police agency who has a grandfather of a suspect to credibly investigate.
Objection, leading.
Sustained. You're on redirect.
Okay, all right. What's the problem with that? With a suspect not being fully investigated, potential suspect not being fully investigated in a police agency where the grandfather serves as the deputy chief.
I'm having a hard time following your question.
Yeah, let me restate it. I think part of your idea of the conflict is you have a grandfather who's in a top position in a criminal investigation division. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. And then assume, if you will, that the grandson is a viable suspect. Does that even magnify the conflict?
Absolutely.
How so and why?
Because there's even the perception that the investigation could be steered away from a particular person, from Dominic.
Okay. And then adding another factor that the lead detective is doing virtually nothing
Objection argumentative.
for months.
Sustained.
Would the failure then of the police agency following up on leads magnify the conflict and the perception of the conflict?
Objection argumentative.
I'll allow that question. Go ahead and answer. Overruled.
The conflict is already there. I don't know about magnifying it. It exists, and the reason why you want to avoid the conflict of interest is to help preserve public trust in your agency and the credibility of the investigation itself. And again, I'm not saying that anybody was overtly doing anything, but you are guiding the investigation around somebody, but you need to avoid even that perception. And with a deputy chief being a commander in the line, the chain of command of the investigation, could have some very serious,
Could have some what, sir?
some serious consequences, some serious, consequences.
Yeah, negative consequences in a fair and full investigation, right?
It's possible.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Do any of the jurors have a question for this witness? All right, there's a couple. I'm going to ask you some questions. If you can answer, go ahead. The first one I've marked as question 61. How was it determined as to what documents/evidence you received or not received when performing your case review?
So that was determined by the scope of my engagement. I was retained to evaluate whether a conflict of interest existed, which narrowed the scope very much in the case. I wasn't looking at innocence or guilt, anything of that sort. I was evaluating whether a conflict of interest existed. Additionally, the SOP, the policies, the agency's policies, review those and compare them to statements made in the interviews of certain investigators, key staff, key people involved, to see if the policies were being followed.
Mr. Lynch, any questions?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Yensvold.
Did you have the opportunity to ask defense for more information if it seemed like you had questions based on the information you were provided.
Yeah, I definitely had the opportunity. I believe after our interview, I followed up and received some information. I believe that you suggested that I take a look at.
But you never amended anything that you sent before our interview, did you, on your findings?
No, nothing that I saw from then on changed my opinion.
So it's just one specific example that we've already covered about whether Jose Nunez was a suspect or not, because Detective Ellsworth apparently didn't realize that he'd been investigated. Did you ask Mr. Lynch to give you more information on any investigation that was done into Jose?
No, there's the information that I had indicated that he had not been investigated as a suspect. I didn't see again, I was looking at the direction, the supervision of the investigation. That was one of the deficiencies that I found, and the conflict of interest. So I don't know that would have really changed anything.
So did you have any of Detective Miller's reports to review, including his first one?
I don't recall.
That's all I have.
Okay.
All right, this one I've marked as question 62A. With time being a factor and evidence coming in quickly in the first hours, at what point in the investigation should Casa Grande have looked into finding another agency to step in?
I believe at the point that the relationship of Dominic to Chief Leos was identified, that a conversation should have occurred then amongst the command staff, the supervision, the leadership, to consider outsourcing this investigation at that point.
Would another agency give it or make it a priority over its own cases?
I believe, considering the nature of this, that it would be given some priority, but I can't speak for how another department would respond.
And for clarification, that was 62B. Mr. Lynch?
And it sounds like the Casa Grande Police Department did actually have some sort of a meeting where they decided that there was a conflict, right?
I believe there was between Deputy Chief Leos and Chief McRory when Chief McRory told Deputy Chief Leos that he was out of the investigation.
That's acknowledgement that there's a conflict, right?
Yes.
Okay. So then the question is, what do you do then when they acknowledge there is a conflict, right? Do you send it out to another agency, or do you hold on to it? True?
I believe that they should have, even if it was the next day, at some point when they realized, like, shoot, there's this big conflict, we should probably outsource it. Obviously, to the point of time being a factor, you want to make that call as soon as possible. But they have conflict of interest policies in place for much smaller, I say smaller, but it is for less important incidents. I believe that reasoning would translate over to a homicide investigation.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Yes, well,
But let me ask you, if the decision that needs to be made in your mind regarding the conflict of interest, is that based solely on the fact that Dominic was supposed to be a suspect?
No, not even just as a suspect, but he could be a victim, the witness. His vehicle, I believe it was his vehicle that received damage, that was shot up. That in itself would, we can see, look, there was no homicide, his car was shot up. Say, look, this is the deputy chief's son, we don't want to have any appearance of impropriety, let's outsource this, conflict this out.
Okay, so you're saying the decision needs to be made to outsource a case only when it's a family member of the agency as a victim or a suspect. Am I reading that right?
Primarily as a victim or a suspect would be good reasons. Now, if The witness portion, that's something else that could be evaluated, but in terms of really protecting the integrity of the investigation, to say the witness and, I'm sorry, the victim, suspect, and actually IACP's guidelines state witness.
Okay, but what if an officer is killed in the line of duty? Does the agency have to conflict off in that case?
No.
Objection, Your Honor, beyond the scope of the question.
Overruled.
No, I don't believe so.
And the officer himself or herself is the victim of a homicide. So the agency can go ahead and investigate that, but not when the officer's wife is shot and killed?
I'm taking into consideration where is that officer, is his wife that is shot and killed, is he the chief of police? Is he the deputy chief? What's the link in terms of the chain of command? Now, if a patrol officer is murdered, I see no reason with the agency conducting that investigation, as long as it's not somebody, you're somebody that was under his chain of command, or again, I keep going back to the familial or a business relationship.
I don't have any further questions.
All right. Is this witness excused?
He is.
All right. We'll go ahead and excuse you at this time. Ask that you not talk about the case with anyone other than the attorneys until it's over. Thank you, sir.
Your Honor.
Mr. Lynch, I'll have you retrieve back the exhibits that are on the
Yes, you can
stand.
do so, and then I'd like to call my next witness, please.
Okay.